extreme music. If you've never heard of what that is, or what that might sound like, then this is the video for you, because I plan to educate you. And if you do know what that is, then I am both sorry for your ears, and I'm also going to be the causation of possibly more damage if you walk away with something new this video. In this video, I plan to cover several sub-genres and sub-genres of extreme music, because every extreme music genre came from a parenting genre that, necessarily isn't extreme per se, but does have extreme variations of sorts. Some of these extreme subgenres that I'm going to talk about in this video are more listenable than others. However, all of them, I would say, deserve the title of extreme, or even just maybe experimental. I don't know, you can tell me in the comments. Now, music is fully subjective, so your blanket statement of what you might see as an extreme genre will almost definitely be different to mine. However, we will have some things that we share. Generally, in extreme music genres, we see that the initial genre is similar enough to the extreme version of the genre to still be considered a subgenre of the parenting genre. Extreme music, however, is when the parenting genre has divided into subgenres that then are so abrasive and different, however, still sticking to the core principles of the parenting genre, that it is pushed to a certain extreme that is, undeniably putting it in that group of, extreme music. Things like abrasiveness, like how fast a BPM is played, how low a tone things can go, how quickly the pitch can go up and down, up and down, up and down, and even sometimes just the lyrical content, or maybe the album artworks. These are all things that will go into making a genre extreme. Without further ado, I'm going to get into the first section of today's video, a genre and lots of subgenres that I enjoy on the daily, and that is going to be Exhibit A of extreme music genres that I'm going to cover in this video today belong to metal and punk adjacent stuff. So you've got your death metal, black metal, hardcore punk, all that jazz, right? But while it is extreme, I do think the subgenres that I have selected today are undeniably more extreme and more befitting of a video like this. Metal and punk alone, I feel like are genres that people who don't listen to them already think are extreme. I mean, if you're in the metal community or in the punk community, you've probably seen some sort of a post where it's just a shit post where it's like, what Metallica sounded like to my parents when I first showed it to them. And it's just some shitty slam song playing in the background over top of Kirk Hammett just playing Master Puppets. But the concept of metal and punk, I think, is warped in a lot of people's minds into, thinking it's just the extreme genres. So I guess the best way to describe each one about to show you are what people who don't know what they're talking about think metal sounds like, or what your grandma thinks you listen to. So I've asked around with my friends, and they all kind of describe the same common trends that we see in the first subgenre that I'm going to be talking about today, which is slam and slamming brutal death metal is an extreme genre and subgenre of death metal, brutal death metal, and stuff like that, basically. In my opinion, slam is the quintessential basis of an extreme music genre and metal and stuff like that, not including punk stuff. We're going to get to that in a second. When I talk about slam, I do not talk about things like Peeling Flesh, because while they are technically slam, I think they are very closely related to hip hop and stuff like that, which it makes it more accessible and, in a sense, less extreme than stuff like Devourment. If you listen to Devourment and then and Flesh side by side, it'd be very hard to make an argument of why they're similar, apart from the vocals and maybe the bands. Yeah.
Killing people.
Traditionally, slam is defined by the extremely low guttural vocals, and as well as every other instrument being tuned as low as it can be, while the snare remains the highest pitch they can allow, often replacing it with tom heads and stuff like that just to make it sound like a tin can. Recommendation! Some examples of a slam band, or slam bands that I think are good to listen to. You should listen to them. Stuff like Devourment, Internal Bleeding, even though Internal Bleeding is more like, you know, it's more commonly known as brutal death metal, but it's like proto-slam, so I'm including them anyways. Disgorge, which I especially recommend. I love Disgorge. Gorgasm and Cerebral Incubation are all great bands to listen to if you're trying to get into the genre, or even if you're into the genre, they're also good to listen to whenever. Essentially, slam is when you take regular death metal and you tone everything down to as low as you can get it, and then make the lyrical content as profound as it can be, just about, you know, bad things, general bad things, just general sinister, evil things. This concoction of blast beats and low-tuned chugging guitars kind of crosses over and becomes this very nice concoction, like basically the Chemical X, and makes it slam, which is really cool. I love slam. I think you should listen to it too. However, slam is not the only extreme music genre in this kind of space, and I think the only way I can really bridge the gap from slam to the other one that I want to talk about is through grind, or grindcore, is a punk subgenre, which is a subgenre of rock. But then, past grindcore, there are subgenres of the music, basically. Grindcore as a genre and its subgenres have become so abrasive and are known so well as an extreme music genre that a symbol has been made to signify that it is noise and not music, which I think is really cool, and I would really recommend you look into the history of it, because one of the best videos I've seen about it, possibly the best video I've seen about it, is by a guy named Crustbag. He made a history of the grindcore noise not music logo, and I could not recommend it more. Please go check out Crustbag. Crustbag, please notice me. First things first, let's set this straight. I'm going to talk about grindcore and then some subgenres, which go as follow. Grindcore, power violence, gore grind, cyber grind, death grind. All great genres that I'm going to explain in 2 seconds. So first of all, I'm going to start with grindcore. Grind or grindcore was originally made to be noise and not music, hence the symbols that we see in every single album cover, basically, of grindcore and grind, stuff like that. But originally, and even now, grind is made to be very abrasive, quick, unforgiving, with lyrics based in punk movements, anarchy, left-leaning political belief, and all that jazz, basically. Grind is mainly defined by its like really breakneck speeds on stuff like the guitar, drums, vocals, and the vocals are usually very loud, abrasive, yelling, which is, it sounds similar to a lot of other genres I'm going to talk about today, which is, you know, I guess screaming is very abrasive. But grindcore is undeniably an extreme genre, which I love listening to, and I think you should listen to too. So I'm going to give some recommendations here. Some bands I think you might like, because I like them, and if I like something, you have to like it, would be something like Hong Kong Fuck You, Wormrot, Sordo, Magruder Grind, and Pig Destroyer, which are all very good. While, you know, they're good bands, I understand they're very mainstream. I understand that Magruder Grind is a power violence band. I'm going to get to that in a second. I know a lot of my picks are very, you know, mainstream, as some would say. Call me a poser, you know. Comment that in the comments. You should like and leave a comment. That really hurts my feeling. One thing grindcore is extremely well known for is how small and short the songs are. Insert that one clip of Napalm Death playing their 1 second song. Now I could go into the whole history behind grindcore and stuff like that, but that's an entirely different video. And for that reason, I'm just going to move on to the next subgenre of grindcore, which is going to be power violence, which I talked about earlier. Now, power violence isn't actually a subgenre of grindcore, and it is more closely related to hardcore punk. However, it uses elements of hardcore punk and noise rock, which is kind of what grindcore uses as well, except it didn't originate from grindcore like the other genres I'm going to talk about. Power violence is essentially just grindcore, but faster, more aggressive, and the production quality and recording quality are lower, which is amazing. Again, having lyrical content of stuff like anti-establishment and just general punk stuff. And some bands I would recommend you listen to, obviously, are Magruder Grind. Then there's also stuff like Nails, Drop Dead, Iron Lung, which all are just amazing bands, and you should check them out. But now we're going to move on to the next subgenre, which is gore grind. Gore grind is one of those extreme music genres where everyone in the scene is just overly edgy, which I understand is the point of it, and I'm not against it. However, I will say it is extreme, usually not for the actual sound it produces, because in my opinion, power violence is a lot more aggressive than gore grind. However, gore grind implements slam-like vocals, but even lower, even slower. Everything is just tuned down another notch, but the lyrical content is just about gore, and all the album covers are usually just dead people. I personally love gore grind, some gore grind, gore noise stuff, you know. Kind of like the same branch of things, but some bands I recommend would be Viscera Infest, Sulfuric Cautery, Liquid Viscera, and Last Days of Humanity are all great bands that I think you should listen to. Again, because I listen to them and what I like you should like. Next subgenre, cybergrind. Cybergrind is a subgenre of grindcore, just like gore grind, except now it incorporates elements of electronic music and stuff like that. So like drum machines, synths, lots of samples, all that kind of stuff mixed with grindcore, which leads to this actually very fun sounding genre, which I would recommend you listen to. I'm saying the word recommend a lot, I should really stop. It's essentially a fun version of grindcore with some higher pitched stuff, so it's not tuned down to like drop Q and stuff like that. But from my listening experience, I really liked it as a genre. So stuff you should listen to are for guys like Genghis Tron, Alien Fucker, and the reek of Unzen gas fumes. Death grind. Death grind is probably the most straightforward grind subgenre due to its name, and obviously the name correlating a lot with what the actual genre is about. Let's play a game of guess that genre. Is death grind either A mix of black metal and grindcore, B, a mix of grindcore and death metal, and C, grindcore with lyrical content about death? If you said B, you would be correct. Death grind is just grindcore with elements of death metal in it. These two genres really go hand in hand and make one of my favourite grindcore genres of death grind, having lots of great bands like Terrorizer, early Napalm Death, Pharmacist, Exhumed, stuff like that, you know. I really do think that death metal and grindcore really do go hand in hand. Because the difference between regular grindcore and death grind is that death grind has the vocals of death metal with some like kind of lower tuning, and grindcore is just like the higher vocals with some higher tuning. And that will now bring us to the end of the metal and punk section, which is now where I lead into the second section of today's video. Hip hop. Okay, I'm just looking at my script now, and I read in like my delirious state like a couple nights ago, it's hip hopping time as the intro to this section. So let me try something here. It's hip hopping time. Extreme hip hop. Now, that's not exactly a collection of words that I think really work cohesively, but it is something that does happen, and it is now going to be the example of this newest section of the video. Extreme hip hop is essentially, my definition of it would be certain hip hop groups, songs, albums that have really abrasive beats, like very uncensored lyrical content, stuff like that, as well as also just like, you know, as I'm going to explain for the last example of extreme hip hop, there is a certain like subgenre of hip hop which is just a bit sinister, some would say. I think first things first, to get us introduced to what I would assume extreme hip hop to be, I think a good starting point would be with Kurt Finney, John Tano here. Death Grips is a very widely known and loved hip hop group, which I myself am a fan of, you know, as well as the most notorious fan of the music being Anthony Fantano. But Death Grips has really cemented themselves in the hip hop scene with like their extremity, the speed, the abrasiveness, the vocals, the lyrical content, the completely random samples that I don't even understand how they could find in the first place, but I love that they did find them, because it's all just so distinctively them. I think a really good place to start with Death Grips is either, obviously, The Money Store is their most popular album, and a good intro to them. However, you could either do that, or you can jump into what I did, and I went straight to Ex-Military, which you can only find on SoundCloud and other streaming platforms, not Spotify. You cannot find it on Spotify as of the time of recording this. I really like Ex-Military because it kind of pushes the limits of what I would assume hip-hop would sound like, and also crosses into this very, like, you know, some of it sounds like extremely harsh for what I picture hip-hop to be, which is great. I think that's amazing, and I really recommend just listening to any of their work, honestly. You should absolutely check them out. But I think that leads into the last example of an extreme hip-hop group, or genre in this case. It's going to have to be Memphis rap. Memphis rap is this very strange anomaly in the rap scene and hip-hop scene, which I'm sure if you're a fan of music or if you're a fan of rap and hip-hop, you've definitely heard of, you know, Memphis rap as a whole. And I really do love the genre. It's one of my favourite hip-hop subgenres. The only thing that makes it Memphis rap is the fact that it's out of Memphis, Tennessee, which is very strange to me, because even though it is based on, you know, the area of which it was made, they all have a very similar tone to them. Now what I mean by that is that Memphis rap beats just feel very sinister and evil, if that makes sense. And I'm sure the avid listeners of Memphis rap, or if you just have like any kind of knowledge behind the genre, you'll know where this is going. And I'm talking about the sigils, the 8 songs or mixtapes that were made. Allegedly, and I understand it's just an urban legend, however I think it's really cool that this kind of culminated and became like literally an urban legend. It's really cool. A sigil in the Memphis rap community is a song that meets several requirements to become a sigil. They are as follows: 1, kill someone; 2, record it; 3, chop up the audio file and sample it; 4, return to the place of murder and rap over the beat; and then 5, put it on a mixtape. You've just created a sigil. And then from that point, the mixtape would be sold to people and would charge the sigil. Now I understand that this is definitely fake and it is just a myth, but I really think it is cool that, like, you know, this is just a thing that happened. There's no like reason for anyone to believe that the sigils are real, but I definitely think that if they were, I would not be surprised, because the way these sound, it just sounds very spooky. You know, it definitely sounds like someone's soul is trapped in the beat. If you want to hear what these sigils sound like, I will list all 8 of them, the alleged sigils that are just recordings of dead people on them. and they are as follows. Four Corners Part 3 by the 10 Wanted Men, Deep Into the Woods by Children of the Corn, Hellraiser by Maniac, Magnolia by Little Ramsey, Outro by HOH, I Can't Say That Word, Of Destruction by NOD, Last Man Standing by Mr. Tinnerman, and Welcome to the Graveyard by Psycho. I've listened to a good majority of them, and they're on YouTube mostly. You can't find them really on Spotify or anything, apart from Children of the Corn. I really recommend you listen to them if you're into hip hop, or even if you're just like if you're like a music fan, trying to just like, you know, get further into some other genres. It's really cool to hear this kind of stuff and like understand. Damn, someone literally thought there was a murder going on in these and then told everyone and it became an urban legend. That's cool. Again, I know no one actually was killed. Well, actually I don't know that. There very well could have been someone that was killed and put into a beat, but I honestly don't believe that would happen. At least I hope it wouldn't. But I'll let you come to your own decision, you know, your own thoughts into whether you think it's real or not in the comments, or just form your own opinion in your head. Anyways, that brings us to the end of the hip hop section, and now we're into the third section, which is going to be... Maybe this is a surprise to you, but it really shouldn't be, because electronic music is possibly the most diverse genre of music I've ever seen. It's got countless subgenres, and just forever like branching pathways that I just can't understand. However, for now I've chosen 3 subgenres to showcase here that I was like infatuated with at the time. I was like, damn, this is so cool. They are as follows. First, we've got digital hardcore. Second, we've got breakcore. And 3, we've got extra tone. Extra tone and its subgenres, okay? Electronic music has such like a wide scale of where you can like listen to stuff at. Obviously you've got like your basic stuff like D&B, drum and bass, EDM, like dubstep, and ranging from that to ambient music, which is this just calming. I love ambient music so much. Digital hardcore is mainly defined by the elements of hardcore punk and EDM elements and electronic synth and all that kind of stuff, kind of culminating into one genre, which I really love the sound of. Merging hardcore and, you know, digital sounds, making digital hardcore. Duh. I honestly think it's such a great genre to listen to, even if you aren't into electronic music, because it's just got like a lot of good stuff. A common thing with the songs that you'll hear in digital hardcore is kind of like really quick tempos, abrasive sounds of like synths and drums and vocals. Usually the lyrical content has general punk stuff, anarchist views, left-leaning, like political views, all that stuff. And a lot like other genres, the origin of which is debated a lot. However, commonly it is agreed that it started in 1994 when Alec Empire released the EP Digital Hardcore. Before, in the late 1994, same year, Alec Empire's band, Atari Teenage Riot, released the now commonly known first digital hardcore album titled Delete Yourself. Alec Empire is basically like the godfather of a lot of electronic music and electronic subgenres that you will see his name a lot, which you're going to see in this next section after I explain some recommendations I give to you for digital hardcore. The recommendations come as follow. Number 1, we have Machine Girls, Because I'm Young and Arrogant and I Hate Everything You Stand For, Kid Caliper's Halcyon Days, and of course Atari Teenage Riot's Delete Yourself. These are all great albums to listen to get into the genre, and if you're already into the genre, I'm sure you'll still like them. These are just some good albums to listen to. Now moving on from digital hardcore, we are now going to jump from digital hardcore to breakcore, which I understand is a large jump in genre and sound. However, I'm sure it's one people will enjoy. So, obviously breakcore's name, I'm sure you've heard of it, but obviously the idea of what you think breakcore is very different, I assume, to what breakcore actually is. Breakcore is a derivative of hardcore EDM and stuff like that, and it is mainly defined by the very sporadic, chopped up breakbeats, samples, and just very, I guess, chaotic and abrasive sound that you hear in each record and song. Once again, Alec Empire is credited for the start and the creator of breakcore, much like he did digital hardcore, when he mixed elements of D&B. He took the beats of D&B and jungle music and he kind of just slapped it on digital hardcore with some elements of gabba, and then breakcore was born, this like really weird child, which all gave birth to this very strange sounding genre, which I personally love, and I'm sure lots of fans do also appreciate and love, similarly to how I did. The first credited breakcore album was made in 1996 by Alec Empire with his album The Destroyer, and from that point lots of smaller breakcore artists would be inspired and they begin to make music themselves. Along the way, from the 1996 to like the 2000s, a lot of like little releases happened. You know, the smaller artists that didn't get as much recognition, but as it began to build and grow into the 2010s and 2000s, the growth of the genre was mainly credited to people like The Nation Snares, who essentially thrust breakcore into the mainstream and kind of like into the eye of a lot more people and began to grow it from there, popularizing it and diversifying the genre as time went on, with other artists like Dormouse, Kid 606, Christopher D. Babylon, and Nathan Bluton, all helping with the growth of breakcore as it kind of just progressed through its like lifetime. Recommendations! The first recommendation is one by The Nation Snares, one that is, I'm sure, very adored and known in the breakcore community. It is The Nation Snares. I can't pronounce that. Put a pronunciation here.
Rossz csillag alatt született.
It's basically like a combination of strings, brass instruments, piano, all culminating into this like kind of controlled chaos of break beats and stuff like that. Another album that I recommend, another one by The Nation Snares, would be Detrimentalist, which throws out the idea of classical music being in the mix and instead opts for purely just breakcore heavy noise, which I love. The album also has some hints of jungle in it with like jungle beats, which I'm sure anyone can get behind because who doesn't love jungle? And the third recommendation, a personal favourite of mine, is by an artist named Hikita, which I'm sure if anyone watching has played Ultra Kill would instantly recognize that name as the creator of Ultra Kill. I, however, am not talking about the Ultra Kill breakcore soundtrack because that would be discrediting the actual breakcore genre. Hikita is a single electronic artist who releases a lot of albums, one of which being a breakcore album, which I have grown to love, titled Tennis Everyone, a tribute to the late great James O. Incandenza. It's a great album. It is a breakcore and drill album made by the creator of Ultra Kill, which I may have a bit of bias when I say I like this album a lot, because I also love Ultra Kill a lot. If you take at least one thing away from this video, please just listen to that album, because I can't recommend it enough. It's so good. But this leads us to the final example of an extreme electronic music subgenre, which is extra tone. Now, extra tone is very simply defined by electronic music that has a BPM higher than 1,000, which is a lot, and it sounds like this. 1,000 BPM is a lot. However, there are then subgenres of extra tone known as supertone and hypertone. Supertone is defined by BPMs between 15,000 and 1.2 million BPM, and hypertone is electronic music with a BPM over 1.2 million. If that sounds insane, good, because it is. The origin of extra tone is debated like every other genre is, but it is also widely known or agreed upon that in 1998, a guy named Enrique 3600 BPM, with his release, I can't pronounce that, extra tone was born out of speedcore being pushed to its limits and then being told it's not fast enough, which then gave birth to extra tone. The genre was further developed by a friend of Enrique 3600 BPM, who would then in the early 2000s push it to its limits, and then a DJ by the name of DJ Ninja Love Mistake would create the record label 1000 Plus, which was this essential breeding ground for extra tone, supertone, and hypertone from that point. First things first, I will recommend Extra Tone album. This is a very, just insane album to me. In my mind, I just can't comprehend how long it is. It is the longest album I've ever seen for anything, to this day. It is a 9-hour album. The album's name is Confession of Lazarus. You can find it on Bandcamp by a guy named Dibaro. Put it up there. Obviously a 9-hour album is pretty insane, and I'm not sure if I've completely listened to the full of it. However, I plan on doing so. Editor, put a note here if I have listened to it yet. Now for the Supertone album, I will be recommending, again, I can't pronounce the name, by Crustbag. Now it's actually very hard to find a Supertone album, as the scarcity of its fanbase is already bad enough, mixed with the fact there aren't many creators that I can find at least. However, this is the one I will be recommending for now. It's very interesting the way that the album sounds, because all the beats are very close to droning together. You'd imagine it'd be like a really fast, just constant, sound of a drum beat or a synth, but it's actually very avant-garde almost, the way it all kind of just mixes together into one long sound, a constant buzzing. The sound of the album alone is very abrasive and almost reminiscent of Harsh Noise, which I will get to in a minute. However, the very quick tempo changes and the high and low pitches that everyone uses is crazy to me. It's honestly an experience I'm sure everyone has to have at least once if they are a fan of music. Which leads us to the last subgenre of extra tone, being hypertone, which is BPM higher than 1.2 million. Now the album I recommend isn't actually an album, and it's actually just a compilation of a lot of different hypertone records, because I could not for the life of me find a hypertone album and not just a collection of songs. So I give you Absolute Hypertone Anthems on Bandcamp. You can find this pretty easily. It's a lot. I think this is possibly the most interesting genre that I cover in this video, because obviously I listen to all of this music and I always think it's very interesting to hear and stuff like that. But from if you just stand back and you just listen to hypertone, you realize that the abrasiveness and the speed of which the beats play reach a point where it all blends together into one drone, and it loops back around from starting at a calm electronic music, at ambience, moves to EDM, dubstep, all that stuff, breakcore, that it just gets faster and faster and faster, and it reaches this plateau of speed where it basically becomes ambient again, because it's just a constant droning noise, and I think that's so beautifully cool. But the one thing I find very, very cool about it is the fact that this is the theoretical limits of music to us, speed-wise. Anything notably past 1.2 million BPM no longer can be perceived by the human ear, and then indirectly limits our hearing ability to hear this music biologically, which I think is just so interesting that we found a way to limit music. I think it's so interesting that our limitations in music actually are real, and biologically we cannot get faster than this if we want to be able to hear a difference. But that does lead us to our last section of today's video, which is Harsh Noise is, in my opinion, the end of the road, the final pit, just the road stop of music. If you get to this point as a music fan, you've basically heard it all. It is the most abrasive, ridiculous, loud, unpredictable music genre you could ever listen to, only rivaled by the unlistenability of Falling in Reverse. First things first, this genre is just completely insane, and I do understand it is technically a subgenre of electronic music. However, if you understand its roots are more from noise rock, it makes sense why I made it a separate section from the electronic music. Harsh noise is defined by I don't even know where to begin. It is abrasive, it is loud, it is high pitch, it is low pitch, it is everything so quickly that it just becomes a slurry, just a sludge, this mush of noise, a wall of noise that just hits you. And it's just so cool that I find that people like me, and there's a lot of fans of this genre, you would imagine not, but there are like a lot of listeners for what it is, who all really enjoy it. Although I will say a general consensus is that not a lot of people listen to harsh noise as a, yo dude, this beat is so fire. A lot of us more so take a standpoint of, wow, people listen to this in their free time by choice when there's no one around. And that to me is just crazy. Like, when I was listening to this, I was on a train, just kind of traveling about, and I kind of realized it was the end of the road for music, really. I've accepted from that point forward that I'm not allowed to give my negative opinions on music, because I don't even listen to music anymore. However, over that, I'm going to start with where it originated, which is in the 70s in Japan. You'll hear the term Japan noise a lot, which is the terminology for noise music that comes out of Japan. However, in the 70s, Japanese noise rock, which also originated in Japan, people basically took Japanese noise rock and just pushed that to its limits. And in the 80s, the Japanese noise rock bands fused with some of the electronic, industrial, and power electronic bands in Britain, which kind of gave birth to harsh noise. And all that culminated into the creation of harsh noise, which is popularized and made by artists such as Merzbow, Incapacitants, Hideo Kaiden, Hanatarash, and C.C.C.C.C. C.C.C.C. There is no definitive first harsh noise album, of course, but I can give you some recommendations for ones that you should check out if you want to get into the genre. And I'm sure if you are a fan of music, you've definitely heard of this first album. It is going to be Merzbow's Pulse Demon. This album is notorious. If you're just like deep into the music rabbit hole and stuff like that, you will have seen this album. Maybe not necessarily heard it, but you've definitely seen this album cover around. And this was my entry point to harsh noise, and I wouldn't have picked a better album to start with because I love this album so much. It's not Merzbow's finest work, but it's definitely one of the best places to start with harsh noise and all that. The album sound is just very abrasive, like horribly abrasive, loud screeching, like really low basses, unpredictability, no set BPM really. It kind of just does whatever it wants. It's really interesting. Another album I would recommend, similar to Merzbow's Pulse Demon, would be the Incapacitants As Loud As Possible. It's similar in the sense that it's got the same erratic, just up and downs, the low lows and the screeching of Merzbow and stuff like that. Different harsh noise is very hard to differentiate sometimes, but I think the Incapacitants As Loud As Possible is a great album to listen to as well. You can find them on Bandcamp, I'm sure, because I can't find them on Spotify. However, maybe they're on Spotify and you can find them. Who knows? And the last album I'll recommend is Spectrum Ripper by Mansona. It uses a lot of the traditional harsh noise elements, but also incorporates stuff like very distant screaming, which in my opinion just really fuses it all together into this like just noise. That's all it is. That's what music is. It's just noise. And that is going to bring us to the conclusion of today's video. Extreme music. I like it. I hope you like it. You don't have to like it. Not a lot of people like it. I think it's really interesting and it tests the limits of what we as people really understand as music, you know. It's the constant testing of just like genres limits and what we as humans can hear and what kind of noises we can make and all that stuff. And I think it's just so sick. So much so that I made this video. And if you enjoyed this video, you should like totally leave a like. You should like subscribe to me because I'm gonna make more videos in the future like this. Anyways, I thought this was really fun to talk about. I really appreciate you watching this far into the video, and I guess that's about it. I hereby take my leave.